Good afternoon. My name is Todd Keating. I'm the Assistant Chief Probation Officer filling in. Can you hear me? Filling in for Marsha Parsons. We're going to get started here. If we could, let's take roll starting at my left. If you could please announce your name and who you represent.
My name is Yvette Irving, representing the County Office of Education.
Amy Miller, Behavioral Health.
Susan Chapman, Public Defender.
Dean Flippold, District Attorney.
Judge Bob Burleson, I'm appearing on behalf of Judge Hood tonight to speak on the, really as a liaison to to speak on the Early Resolution Court and the benefits of the Early Resolution Court and what it would take to adequately staff that court.
Cynthia Hassan, Deputy County Counsel.
Todd Keating with Probation.
Mike Moore, Undersheriff, sitting in for Sheriff Steve Bernal, Monterey County Sheriff's Office.
Bob Masterson, King City Police Department, representing Monterey County Chiefs.
Chris Donnelly, Interim Director for the Workforce Development Board.
Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda?
Let the record reflect there were no additions or corrections to the agenda.
Okay, that brings us to public comment. Is there anybody from the public that would like to comment on anything that's not on the agenda? Is there anything on the consent calendar that the public would like to pull? Is there any item on the consent calendar that the CCP members would like to pull?
Motion.
Second? Aye. Abstentions? The tier system. Marissa Fiore has a presentation for that.
Good afternoon, CCP. In front of you, you have item number 4A relating to the tier system. At the meeting of January 9th this year, the CCP received already a presentation on a recommendation for a tier system. The County of Sonoma had adopted one, which we found useful to identify priorities that are based on legislative mandates, to establish criteria for funding, support the delivery of services, particularly in terms of long-term planning. And so in that presentation, we reviewed the tier system, and we, based on the definition assigned to each of the tier system, assign a tier number to the service activities or programs that are currently funded by the Public Safety Realignment AB 109. So just to recap, there are 3 tiers. The first one is called critical. Those are the services that are related to the custody and supervision of offenders, includes alternatives to incarcerations, and services that address the basic needs of mentally ill and homeless offenders. And so these are the programs that must be funded in order to meet mandates. Then tier 2, it's called beneficial, and it supports the programs and activities that address the needs of the offender population toward rehabilitation and crime reduction. And they include short-term reentry, employment, and victim services. They might not directly impact AB1 offenders, but they benefit the criminal justice system as a whole. And tier 1, it's ancillary, and there are program and services that provide ancillary benefits to the criminal justice system as a whole. As you can see in the attachment to this memo, which was also the one presented on January 9th, we don't have tier 1 services at this juncture. We only have tier 1 and tier 2, and those are identified in the attachment to the memo. And this concludes the presentation.
thank you for the report. When this was brought up at the last meeting, I had just requested some clarification. In concept, I'm not opposed at all to this. I think one of the things that concerns me and my staff is that when we look at the proposed tiers in terms of prioritizing the services, almost everything's a 1. And so if there had to be any cuts, there would be, the 2s would presumably be cut. That raises some concern to me, and I think there's concerns about reentry, the victim services, and so on. What I would like to suggest is that perhaps we could have some type of subcommittee or something to really look at that and make sure that we're putting these services, because as I understand it, this was determined by staff in terms of rating this, if I'm correct on that or not.
That is correct.
Yeah. So if that is the case, then I would again request the opportunity to have a subcommittee look at that and come back, so we have some more eyes on what would be a tier 1, what would be a tier 2, and we have no tier 3s, I don't think, at least on the proposal in front of us. So that was some of my comments before we go ahead and accept it as it is right now.
So I guess, go ahead.
I think I just have a question more, and maybe somebody can clarify this, but was it staff that decided what was a tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, or was that a report that we got that explained it? Because in the first of that, it explained what a tier 1 was critical, tier 2 was beneficial. Was that the staff that made that, or was that were those definitions, did they come from the state, or did they come from somewhere else?
I believe it was fashioned after Sonoma County's
After Sonoma County's
tier system. Well, I suppose we can move forward. If we don't approve the tier system, it just changes the motion of how we proceed at this point, because the tier system is tied to the rest of the items, especially the existing programs and services.
In terms of the budget, is that?
Right. And when we get to the baseline budget, it would come up there as well.
Well, what would be the process if we delayed, if we went ahead and approved it now and wanted to modify it at a later date as with regard to a specific tier number on a particular issue?
We could trail this matter next week. I believe the 22nd, we have another meeting. I mean, it's a short turnaround, but we could wordsmith the tier system to better identify what. So is your question the
Directing that
to Mr. Flippo?
I think it goes to the whole thing. What I'm concerned about is that we may have adopted Sonoma County's definitions without really examining here in Monterey County what we would be critical, what would be beneficial, and whatever the third one was. And then secondly, once we get through those definitions, then what has been placed here before us as tier 1s, and there's I see there's a tier 2, OET, employment, I see, I think maybe 4 twos, tier 2s. So what I'm, again, suggesting is, and I don't want to delay the budget or certainly any great extent, if we're going to be meeting in a week, if we could have some type of little, subcommittee get together and decide that. What may be good for Sonoma may not fit our needs here.
Budget items in the tier.
Okay.
So for this item A, adoption of the tier system, I suggest that to a second. So
I would so move.
second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? We'll receive a presentation on the fiscal 17-18 public safety realignment budget. Don Souza will be presenting. Oh, I did it again.
Good afternoon, CCP. It's my first time using the clicker, so bear with me. So this afternoon, I'll be presenting on the fiscal year 2017-18 recommended requested budget, which includes reallocations and augmentations. And I'll also be presenting on the fund balance, funding and expenditures, and forecast. These are items 4, B, and C in your agenda, and I'll be doing them in combination. So the fiscal year 18 budget is set at $13,300,000. It includes all reallocations and augmentations that are in your packet. It's an increase of $206,000 over the prior year's approved budget, which is around 1.58%. It's an increase of 5 FTEs over the prior year, going from 44 to 49. Supports all existing programs at the current service level, including cost escalators. It is a realignment of around $2.1 million, which is primarily from the Sheriff's Department and probation. It includes realignment for existing services and augmentations for new services, and covers county cost escalators up to a portion of that. It also includes new services of the Early Resolution Court and the Criminal Justice Data Infrastructure Project. So some definitions as we go forward. The budget realignment is defined for our purposes as modifying the budget to align costs and expenses with incoming revenue. Reallocation is reallocating funds within the same department budget to move resources from one program to another or activity to another, which better addresses needs. Augmentations are defined as funding for new programs, services, or activities. And then county cost escalators, which are mentioned, include change in cost due to projected or negotiated increases in benefits, insurances, or county infrastructure costs. So the realignment that happened from the 16-17 budget, which we consider a transition year because of the realignment, includes dollars shifting from the jail beds out of county at around $1.4 million, $324,000 from the day reporting center for reimbursement from the CDCR, and $337,000 from electronic monitoring. So these are monies that were budgeted in 16-17, but will not be spent, not forecasted as spent, this fiscal year. But for next fiscal year, the departments went back and scrubbed their budgets and realigned those dollars to better suit the needs of realignment. And this is where the 2.1 has been allocated to. So the reallocation is $285,000 within probation's budget, and that covers the cost of a program manager 2 and a probation aide. $580,000 within the sheriff's budget, and that covers a sheriff sergeant and a one-time purchase of jail safety equipment. Additionally, augmentations for new services include $193,200 for the Criminal Justice Data Infrastructure Project, $490,000 for the Early Resolution Court, which is split evenly amongst the district attorney and the public defender. Cost escalators are more than the $536,000 that will be covered by this reallocation, and those are mentioned in the staff report as well. So fund balance forecast, if I could direct your attention to the handout in your packet, that is our standard quarterly report out regarding funding from the state and projected expenditures and fund balance. Changes for this report include the following. We've updated the projected fiscal year 17-18 to show the budget as presented if approved, the effect it has on the year-end balance, and the annual reserve, which is now a policy calculation that was made in prior CCP meetings. So currently, for fiscal year 16-17, if the amount of the budget is fully spent outside of the CDCR reimbursement, we're predicting that the year-end fund balance will be around $5.1 million, with the 1.8 as reserve. That fund balance could vary based on the fact that the amounts that were realigned in the fiscal year 18 budget probably will not be spent in fiscal year 16-17. But as the CCP has approved the 16-17 budget, there might be some sway in those numbers. So that's just a heads up for that number. Additionally, the escalators for going out years have been increased to 4%, and that's due to reports from Monterey County that costs for workers' comp, health insurance, negotiated salaries and benefits are going up at a higher rate. So it seems more prudent to increase the budget at a higher percentage rate. Previously, it was forecasted at 3%. Next steps, the CCP has on the agenda, item 4C, approval of the baseline budget, reallocations and augmentations before you for consideration this afternoon. Additionally, future items after this meeting would include county departments reviewing and identifying additional areas of need. Those items would need to be sent to the probation department by close of business this Thursday in order to meet the public meeting deadlines, and also because of the President's Day holiday. We need to post the agenda within a certain amount of hours. Additionally, the CCP is in consideration of continuing the budget workshop roadmap by identifying gaps in services. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take questions.
Is there any public comment on this item? Any comment from the board?
Just a few questions. So basically what I'm hearing in layman's terms is we underspent last year and they're reallocating some funds for this coming year.
That's correct. So we're projecting we're going to underspend this year, and those same budget line items we're going to redirect to other services.
Are we redirecting those for, I heard a one-time cost for the Sheriff's Department for equipment. Are the other ones ongoing costs we're reallocating for?
That's correct. They're for FTEs, with the exception of the Criminal Justice Data Infrastructure Project, and that currently is a one-time cost.
Okay. I just have some concern that we're looking at a budget that's going to allocate funds for ongoing costs for money that's not coming in, constantly drawing down our internal reserves. I know we set a $1.8 million for reserves that we're not touching, but we do have internal reserves, the $7 million or $5 million, depending on which way you look at it.
Correct.
At what point are we going to start looking at realistically readjusting those to match what the state is allocating for us, so we're not constantly overspending? My concern is hiring hard cost people as we go down the road and the state doesn't match that funding. My concern is at one point we're going to come to a point where the services we're providing now are going to have to diminish in some capacity because we're setting a budget now that overspends.
So currently, with the most prudent forecast, we would look at the reserve potentially, not the reserve, the fund balance potentially being eroded beyond 2020, which is on your forecast. So that's 3 to 4 years down the road. Additionally, right now, we're predicting that funding is flat from the state, but we would look at having to realign the budgets with those reductions in mind in the next probably 3 to 4 years. Probably close to the 4 years, because the most prudent projection does not take into consideration that it really probably will not be a $5.1 million fund balance. It's going to be more like $7 million, roughly. So that would take us out another year.
So we're looking at 4 to 5 years before we spend down our fund balance.
Correct.
And I see this year where we're adding 5 FTEs?
Correct.
Okay. No, nothing further.
Any other comments?
Just a question. I know kind of in the briefer, there was a very, very brief description of the kind of the changes. By the time we vote on it, will we get a little bit more just description on what the these major realigned programs are?
Sure. I can actually go over some of them in summary, and then if you like, I can direct some questions to the subject matter experts, the departments that have requested those, if you like.
Yeah, I think it's handy when we approve it just to have, again, a little bit more depth to the description.
Sure. And to clarify, your questions are regarding the reallocations and the augmentations?
Yes.
Okay, so I can go through those briefly and then direct further questions to the departments that have requested those.
Okay.
And I can do that now if everyone's in agreement.
Sure.
Okay. So the sheriff is asking for a reallocation of $230,000. That is for a 1 FTE sheriff sergeant. That is for supervision of AB 109 funded deputies and programs. And a brief summary of that need for that program includes that the position will provide supervision of AB 109 funded deputies, work to ensure the jail offers a variety of evidence-based inmate programs to address education needs along with the life skills, and help supervise a new reentry program that includes elements of treatment, education, and reintegration into society for clients. It also includes a one-time purchase of safety and program tracking equipment of $350,000. Specifically, they're looking at purchasing new technology equipment that detects weapons and contraband, and enhancements to existing inmate participating and tracking programs. And at this point, I'll pause if anybody has questions for the sheriff's office regarding those reallocations. Seeing none, I will move on. There are 2 reallocations for the probation department. The first is a probation aide, and that is for the pretrial program. The probation aide will be conducting pretrial assessments. This need is due to an increase in workload for existing staff, which is a result of an update/increase of individuals that will be considered for pretrial release. That is $105,000. The other reallocation for probation is for a program manager 2, and that is in the amount of $179,000. And the need for that program is a program manager to evaluate, manage, and supervise AB 109 funded programs and service deliveries, including contract management, outcome measures, operational policy, and procedural development, to provide oversight for data collection, quality assurance, and supervise activities of assigned staff. This includes support to the Probation Adult Division with collecting, analyzing, and reporting supervision-related data and providing oversight for all AB 109 reporting. This also falls in line with the legislative mandate of evaluation of effectiveness of rehabilitation and supervision programs and ensuring fidelity. The augmentations, there are 2. One is for the probation department, and one is a combined ask from the district attorney and public defender. Probation is requesting $193,000 to $193,200 for a contract with Monterey County Information Technology to establish secure a secure server, create, process to store information in a central repository with backup, data mining of various source systems and integration of data to expand reporting beyond manual aggregation of singular data elements. I know a little bit about what that means. It is the development of an internal infrastructure for data integration, development of analysis, reporting analytics, and simplified dashboard navigation. The district attorney and the public defender are asking for a combined $490,000, and that's to add a deputy district attorney and one deputy public defender. And that's to provide services for a new program at the misdemeanor arraignment calendar to identify lower-level criminal offenses, which can be quickly resolved by experienced deputy district attorneys and deputy public defenders. Resolution of cases at arraignment provide release from custody, help alleviate jail overcrowding. It often allows defendants to remain employed, provides faster family and support system reunification, and moves the cases faster to a collaborative court. It reduces the amount of court appearances and calendaring events for clients, court and attorney staff, and results in decreased costs associated with incarceration in the court process. So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions for probation, district attorney, or the public defender.
Are there any questions? Okay.
You're welcome.
Seeing none, I will ask for a motion to approve the baseline budget for fiscal year 17-18 to include reallocations and augmentations as presented, but disregarding the tiers assigned to them on the documentation in front of you. Second? Those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
I just have classification questions that aren't quite, I'll approve it, but I'm assuming that there's still some classification work being looked at. But aye.
Okay. So the next CCP meeting is scheduled for February 22nd at 3:30 in this room. And I move for adjournment.
That's okay. Great job. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.